Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be doing our mock draft 4.0, I guess technically our 5.0. I haven't done one of these in a little while though, and I wanted to do it after the free agency period. Of course, there's moves that are still going on. We added a guard from Miami. I I believe Robert Jones, someone who started every game in 2024 and 2025, but was injured all of last year. Anyways, though, we are going to be doing the full 7 round mock draft, and things have changed from our post combine mock draft that was a couple weeks ago. In that, of course, we traded our 3rd round pick for Oso Digizua, so we don't have that 92nd pick, but we have our 1st round pick still, 2nd round pick, and I believe 3 4th round picks. Maybe it's even four. I kind of have to check to see. Um, Anyways, though, we are going to be doing the standard settings, caring for positional value, drafting for need, and randomness. That is pretty much at a net zero there. Also, I have a pretty exciting announcement, and I'm going to be utilizing it in today's video so you guys can kind of see my write-ups and how I think about a lot of these prospects. But I made a website. So I have a website where I made my top 50 big board. I actually completed it probably about a week and a half ago, but I just wanted to highlight it in this video. So this is the website. It is rulebooksports.com, and essentially we have our big board mock draft to the top right. But if you click View Big Board, we are brought up to this page where we have, it is just very simple, very clean cut. We have my top 50 players. So we have a little legend too, players I consider to be blue chip, and that tag will appear to the right. Round one players, round two players, and a couple sleeper players. So yeah, there's 50 players, a couple surprising individuals that you might see. Zaki Weekly is one of them. Um, but yeah, I will be utilizing this for this video. If you click on anyone's name, you will have the full scouting report. And one thing you kind of will notice is that I have to complete my write-ups on some players, but I think it's after the 18th Mekhi Lemon, it gets a lot more expansive, so I go a lot more in depth there. Anyways, though, to go back to the mock draft, here we go, and let's enter it. And man, it's unreal that draft day is almost upon us. It's practically a month away at this point. It snuck up quick. A lot of players that I mocked in January who were, 5th, 6th round players are now potentially going to go in the 1st round, 2nd round. If you guys saw the thumbnail, it was a little bit of a tease. Malachi Lawrence, he's a player I've mocked in pretty much every mock draft. Enough of that though. The board kind of falls in an interesting way here. This is kind of how I expect. Although I'm quite surprised that the Cowboys took Jordan Tyson there. No Cassius Howell, who is a player that I am kind of coming around on. Of course, he has those historically short arms, the smallest. I believe it's his arms, not his hands. The smallest arms ever in the combine. Emmanuel McNeil-Warren to the Chargers, and Akeem Mesidor, probably my two top picks for the 49ers to draft. And as a preliminary discussion, I think it's fairly obvious now after free agency that left guard is our biggest need. And of course, we picked up the Miami guard today to kind of combat that. But yeah, that is still a need. I ideally Robert Jones is his name. I don't know why I can't remember. Robert Jones, and he has played quite a bit. I don't think he is substantially better or substantially worse than Burford, but that's not a good thing. We really want an improvement on that position. He is a better pass blocker than a run blocker. That is one thing you notice about Robert Jones. Um, when you look at left guard, Emmanuel Pregnon is someone who's been climbing up boards, and he's a very solid player. I think he is honestly the safest guard in the draft, even more so than Vega Ione, because I think Ione has definitely a higher upside, but Pregnon, I think he does everything good at a solid NFL level. You look at the run block rate; it's very solid. Same with pass block. The one thing about Pregnon is he is a little bit older. I believe he's 23, and it's kind of a little bit sketchy because it took him many years to catch his stride. Although he has only let up, one sack in the last 3 years, less than 10 hits. He really cleaned up his technique as well with the two hurries. And he has a great size. I mean, 6'5", 318. Maybe you could argue that he could get a little bit bigger in the weight category, but that should be no issue. You look to the right there, some of his best games are against good competition. Uh, Indiana, you see Penn State, um, Iowa as well. And yeah, man, Pregnon, he won't be the pick here just because I really like to switch up my first round picks every mock draft. So my very first one I picked Pregnon, and then I think I picked Mesidor. Emmanuel McNeil Warren was one of them. Um, Casey Conception was another. And so while I certainly think he would be an immediate starter, in all honesty, I think he would be a plug and play guy. At the very least, he would be able to compete for the spot. I'm not going to go with Pregnon here. And another interesting thing too is with wide receivers, right? Like we see Omar Cooper on the board here, who is awesome. I think he's a really good player. He's a yak guy. I've said it 1,000 times before. He's a yak guy, but in a different way. I don't like using the Debo Samuel comparison. In all honesty, I don't think they're as similar as some people make them out to be. But he definitely has that physical edge to him. Um, there are just some aspects about his game that do concern me. His separation is one of them. I mean, same thing with Elijah Surratt in that regard. But, he can win at the point of attack. However, wide receiver is an interesting part of this team because, of course, we picked up Mike Evans, who's going to be our wide receiver one. We have Ricky Pearsall at our wide receiver two, who I think is a high-end wide receiver two. And we have Christian Kirk as our wide receiver three, who I think could possibly be the best wide receiver three in the league. But you look at it, what I said right now sounds very good, but when you kind of look at it from an outside point of view, our wide receiver room is probably outside the top 15 still. I mean, we have to see how it fares to start the season to come to that conclusion. But our wide receiver room and core is strong enough at the moment because of the other pieces we have along the offense, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, etc., etc. And for that reason, I'm not going to be going wide receiver here. Omar Cooper, Casey Conception, Chris Bell, he is a name that's been floated. I'm a little bit more hesitant on. The one thing I will say is that if we go with a wide receiver in the first 2 rounds, I think that the front office really needs to think about the archetype that they want because we have Mike Evans, as I said, is our big body 6'5" X receiver. We have Ricky Pearsall, who is our route runner. Uh, he can line up on the outside, but can also motion to the inside and can run. Ricky Pearsall runs the whole route tree, just as Mike Evans does, and same as Christian Kirk. Like they all run the whole route tree. Christian Kirk can kind of stretch the field. The one thing that's missing is, the kind of line of scrimmage guy, the very early separator in routes. Certainly Christian Kirk is a elite separator in the short area, but he is a little bit older. And you think about a couple players that will really provide that value both at the line of scrimmage and after the catch. And like these guys, Omar Cooper, Casey Conception, someone like Zachariah Branch, in that regard make a lot of sense. But at the same time, I don't know if I necessarily want to see them use their draft capital specifically in the first round to address that. So the position that we're going to be looking at is edge. Caden Proctor is another player. Um, I just think that, the 49ers have indicated that they're in win now mode. Caden Proctor is a project, which would work perfectly if they signed Trent Williams. He could learn from him for a year or two. But again, like I said, I think they're in win now mode, so they want a player that can immediately come in and make an impact. Caden McDonald, a really good run defender, perhaps the best run defender in the class. I mean, that's the one thing about the defensive linemen is they're all great run defenders. I think Caleb Banks, despite the sacks and the um, metrics not showing up with hits, I think he is a pretty good pass rushing defensive lineman. Um, but the defensive line class isn't tremendous in the pass rush this year. TJ Parker, an interesting prospect. I really did when I saw the board right now. I did want to go with TJ Parker. He's just a interesting player. Because he really had this downtick in production this year, specifically with the sacks. He didn't have a bad year by any means. I would just say it was nothing special. Like he does everything fine. I don't think he excels at anything. Kind of like what I mentioned with Pregnon. But the thing with TJ Parker is he's an edge rusher who would slot in as our primary edge rusher and would need to make an immediate impact. And I don't know. Watching the tape on TJ Parker, you look at his frame, and I mean, he has a decent frame. It's nothing to scoff at, like 6'3", 260. Um, but I don't know. Like you look at the tape, and he's pretty violent. That's the one thing you notice. His hands, he's very violent with his hands. Um, the pass rush win rate is there at 16%. And he actually can drop into coverage as well, which is nice for an edge rusher. The thing is, again, like his production decreased. He doesn't have a lot of bend for a first round edge rusher, and he's kind of inconsistent with the run. The metrics don't necessarily show that here because he's in the top quartile in both run defense grade and um, run stop rate. But that's just those are kind of two things that I did notice with him. Um, yeah, I don't have honestly I don't have a lot to say about TJ Parker because he's just a prospect that I'm really unsure of. Like I like him, and like I said, I considered him at this spot, but there's I don't think he excels at one thing. So because of that, we're gonna go down the board. Uh, Max Ehaniker, this is a guy that I love as well. I mentioned Caleb Banks, who's actually a top prospect on my big board. And we're going to go all the way down the board here, skipping past a lot of prospects, including Zion Young, Lee Hunter. And we're going to look at R. Mason Thomas, someone that I haven't really talked about at all in any of my videos. And the thing about R. Mason Thomas, first thing I have to mention is he lacks, the bigger size. He's 6'2", 250, so he's a bit of a tweener. He can certainly put on weight. But I don't know if we need him to because he has a unique skill set. He has, I would say, one of the better get-offs for an edge in this year's draft. He is a great athlete. He has. It's weird because at the combine he didn't run a very good time. I think it was like 4.67, and you would have liked that to be a little bit faster based off his size. But he has a really nice closing speed that you see on tapes, and he has a natural chase down ability. I don't know if it's his stride or just his general range of motion, but he can really get after quarterbacks. The metrics don't show it here. I mean, his pass rush grade is at the top of his class. He also has a 35% win rate on true pass sets, which kind of is exemplified in the true pass rush grade as well. He, unlike TJ Parker, I believe, does have that pretty good bend for an edge. And in his last 2 years, I mean, the guy has had, 16 sacks. I think the one concern with him is, again, he lacks the ideal size. It doesn't show it here, but on tape he actually misses quite a few tackles, especially when he's on a option, when he is the primary defender that has to decipher whether if it's a QB run, a QB keeper, or a handoff. And he dealt with ankle injuries. You see 2023, he dealt with ankle injuries that year, and he also dealt with a quad injury throughout this year, although it didn't really impact him too much. One really good predictor that I've mentioned in previous videos is an uptick in production, and you generally see that here. Of course, he missed a couple games, so he only finishes at 6 sacks, but he had more hurries last year. Um, had a, maybe the hits you would have liked that to be a little bit higher. But R. Mason Thomas, and another critique with him is you look at the grades to the right, and you can kind of tell that he feasted on some smaller teams, Kent State, Ball State, but he played good against, some of the better teams as well, like South Carolina, Tennessee, Ole Miss. Didn't necessarily have a bad game against Auburn and Alabama as well. And he is, we're going to kind of utilize um, my big board here. And like what I mentioned, I think that, when we think about what the 49ers need, of course, Bryce Huff just retired kind of surprisingly. Nick Bosa, he should be back. He should be healthy. He should be able to be a game wrecker. And man, in those couple games where we had that true speed rusher in Bryce Huff, as well as Nick Bosa, who's kind of a combination of the two, I really liked what I saw. And R. Mason Thomas is going to be more of a, speedy edge rusher who has that high quality pursuit, right? Um, and yeah, man. I also one thing I forgot to mention is, for my write up here, I have that he is a clutch player. He has, 40% of his sack production occurring in the fourth quarter. Kind of a random metric, but that is, we need a closer. We certainly need a closer. Nick Bosa has been able to do that and be that guy, but with his injury history, it is a little bit iffy there. And like I said, he didn't run a particular good combine, and his measurables are his main concern. He has the sub 32-inch arms, but ultimately, my NFL comparison for him is Vic Beasley Jr. And if you guys remember Vic Beasley, he was explosive coming out of college. He didn't, live up to the hype necessarily, but he was an awesome player. And for all the reasons I mentioned, I'm going to be picking R. Mason Thomas. Again, I'm skipping out on a lot of players that I really do like. Like Chris Johnson is a top 30 player on my big board. Same with Jacob Rodriguez. D'Angelo Pons is on there. Caleb Lomu is again, I just really quickly want to highlight Caleb Lomu is a player that it's just similar to what I mentioned earlier with winning now. And I think the 49ers are in win now mode. And of course, the left tackle for the future is a huge need. But I truly think we can address it next round or next year in the draft. And we need to go for an edge or safety or a guard in round one. And one thing, too, the caveat to that is I believe that the 49ers have to draft their edge in the first 2 rounds. Because there's a big fall off in edges after that. And you guys will see. There's a couple good ones, a couple gems. But I would say after this, Romello Height, who also made my big board, a very good player that I like, there is, a big drop off here. I like Mikhail Kamara. I like Mason Reger. I kind of am coming around on George Gums, and a couple like an underrated player down the board I like is Kayshawn James newbie, who was at the Shrine Bowl. Anyways, though, going to our pick, it's going to be R. Mason Thomas with the first round pick there at pick number 27. And man, it really pains me because I do love Malachi Lawrence. He is one of my favorite players. Him, Max, and the guy that I'm going to go with here, who is Traydon Stukes. Now, I think a lot of fans will be asking me, why am I going with a cornerback in round two? We don't need one. And to that, I would agree tenfold. We don't necessarily. You could make the argument we may need one, but it's like there's a laundry list of other positions that could come before corner. The reason why is because I think he could come in and play safety right away. You look at his alignments. Traydon Stukes, by the way, I'm gonna put this out there. He is um, a senior, so he is a bit older, but he has played just like he has so much experience. He has been playing football for 5 years. So you look at his alignments. He aligned as a slot corner, as a box corner, and even as a box safety, and a couple snaps as a deep safety this year as well. I think the biggest thing about him is just consistency, man. You know what you're going to get from him, and I don't think he has a lot of errors or mental lapses in his game. I mean, you look at the coverage grade, that is pretty much the highest in the class. Man coverage grade, zone coverage grade, it's really where you want it to be at. He can get his hands on the ball as well too. You see the 4 INTs, you see the 34.5 passer rating. I mean, he's a lockdown corner by all means, and I really think that he could seamlessly transition to being a safety because when you look at the tape, him and Genesis Smith, they would kind of switch around with one another based on the offensive scheme. And I really don't think Traydon Stukes missed a beat. I think I potentially could this pick might garner issues because a lot of people, Genesis Smith would be available at our next pick. He was a player that I was high on originally, but I am not that high on now. Honestly, I think Traydon Stukes is a much better player. But back to him, he also has Stukes kind of has the ideal size, 6'2", 200. You look to the right, consistency against big schools. Played great competition this year. And he had a great combine as well. I believe he ran a 4.33, extremely fast. And this is coming off a little bit of a bigger injury, but he will be completely fine. He ran at the combine, got a 99th percentile score. And again, yeah, he's my number one nickel in the draft, in all honesty. And if we're thinking safeties, he is my number four safety. It goes Caleb Downs, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, AJ Halsey, and Traydon Stukes, but he could potentially even move into the third safety. But dude, he has 2,700 snaps total. Again, you see all these snaps the past couple of years, but in his 5 years, 2,700 career snaps between safety, which he has had 500 snaps at safety in his career. You look at 2023, 2024 was his injury, so he didn't play that many snaps, but this guy had pretty much 220 snaps at safety last year. He is a matchup-proof athlete, and he has, great hip fluidity. This is one thing I noticed watching the tape. Again, the 4 INTs is nice. He had 6 pass breakups, and this is only in 9 games. It says 10, but 9 because he exited out of one. I think the thing with him too is he brings intensity. Like he loves to jump passing lanes, which is amazing. You look at some of his interceptions, and he looks like a wide receiver. I don't know if he played wide receiver in high school, but he has elite body control and maybe some of the best ball hawking skills for a DB in this draft, as crazy as it is to say. I think he plays long at the catch point, and yet he just has in general has good physicality. We look to what I mentioned in my big board, and I mentioned a bunch of strengths there. Um, I guess there's a couple weaknesses. Yeah, he's 28th on my big board, and this guy was a guy that I was mocking in the sixth round not too long ago. Again, he's 24 years old. Suffered that significant knee injury. He is not a liability in the running game in run defense. Um, However, sometimes he's caught out of position. He just needs a little bit more discipline in that regard, and I think that can come. Like I mentioned, I kind of continue that one of the weaker early round run defenders, especially for a safety. And we look at his comp, and I honestly said Derwin James. Like I I see it, man. I really do. I think Tre'Don Stukes is has been my biggest riser in this entire draft process. Again, as I said, I think I even mocked this guy in the seventh round in January, and I'm taking him with our second round pick here. I really do like the player, and if you guys haven't, you should watch tape on him. Again, I think he can seamlessly transition to a safety because like he has a lot of experience, over 500 snaps in his college career. Um, and yeah, again, an underrated prospect who's kind of getting noticed more now. There's a couple other players in this position that I like. Of course, Malachi Lawrence I mentioned. Chris Brazell, he is, that 6'5" X receiver type of guy who I'm also coming around on more. However, I just don't think he would be the archetype that would fit. Bryce Lance, I actually would maybe prefer him at this point as a field stretcher, but hopefully we can develop Jacob Cowing as a field stretcher, and ideally he stays healthy. Same with Jordan Watkins. Not that Jordan Watkins was not healthy, just that ideally we'd get him on the field. Like I mentioned, Joshua Josephs, Derek Moore, two great edge rushers in round two. If we didn't go with R. Mason Thomas in round one and we went someone like Pregnon or maybe even a wide receiver, I would love to get one of those players. Um, and yeah, Tre'Don Stukes is the pick there. We move on to our 127th pick, the first of our four fourth rounders, I believe. As I mentioned before, Oso Digizua for a third round pick. I think that is, very worth it. Of course, we accumulate a little bit of a heavier contract, but the defensive line, it's a position I want to attack in the draft, but it's not, one that I am necessarily super inclined to. I think it potentially could be one of the weaker positions on the field, despite Oso Digizua, if not Michael Williams, if Alfred Collins and CJ West can't develop. But you'd like to imagine that, they can develop into what we want them to. And the board falls. Bud Clark, safety, a player that I really like, played pretty good at the Senior Bowl. But we just took a safety. Decario Davis, a intriguing prospect here, because if we did move Tre'Don Stukes to safety, Decario Davis, he has that frame, 6'4", 200, ran a very fast combine. Kind of similar to the Reek Woolen archetype. Was pretty inconsistent, but he was a former projected first round pick. He does have a lot of talent. And the stats, he is a solid corner. His man coverage grade dropped quite a bit this year. I don't think that's necessarily indicative of his skill set, though. Like, it seemed like Takario was certainly playing through something this year. But at the same time, I think there were some coverage regressions. And for that reason, I don't think he's necessarily the pick there. Running back's interesting. Kyle always loves to take a running back. I I hope he doesn't. As I mentioned in previous videos, I feel like there's two guys that can really back up CMC in Jordan James and Isaac Orindo. Jordan James, our rookie from last year who has a nice skill set as a smaller player, and Isaac Garindo, who has shown to be a pretty good running back, running behind the offensive line a couple years ago. I think he had a couple 100-yard games and something like 4 or 5 yards per carry. Also, Brian Robinson, he's kind of a um, do we sign him or do we don't or do we not? We re-signed Patrick Taylor. I don't know how that really impacts the Brian Robinson situation. A couple running backs I wouldn't mind in this area are Nicholas Singleton. I also like Damon Claiborne, and I like Jamari Taylor and Kalen Black, all kind of in the same range. The two Indiana running backs are pretty interesting, but I don't think we're going to go running back here. And the board's pretty interesting. Nadami Tucker is a player that I've been seeing getting mocked to, you know, a lot of different teams in the later rounds. I'm not sold on him. I watched some tape and he dominated. Not actually, I don't think he dominated. I think he looked good for Western Michigan. But there were a couple things on the tape that I didn't necessarily like, including, I mean, I thought he was. I actually think he translates the power to speed pretty well. But he just, I think, relies on being a gifted athlete too much, and especially in. I hate to be that guy that dogs on um, worse conferences, although this isn't even a bad conference in college. You know, of course, there's players that will outperform their schools, but I don't think he's necessarily the pick there. And one problem we haven't addressed yet in this draft is the offensive line, and I think I saw a guy that has consistently been mocked in pretty much all my videos, and it's Bo Stevens. You know what they say, draft a lineman from Iowa, and he is a left guard. You look at the PFF metrics there at the top, uh, pretty much top quartile for everything except gap grade, where he is a little bit below average. So that signals to me that he needs to just develop a little bit of awareness, especially in terms of, stunts and whatnot. But you look at the tape, and he's an awesome pulling guard. You see, they pull him on a lot of plays. They did that at Iowa. And also, while it doesn't show it here, he actually has played a substantial amount of time at right guard as well, even though, left guard is going to be where he will probably um, make his mark in the NFL. You look at he hasn't allowed a sack in his last 3 years, just 3 hits in the last 3 years, uh, 10 hurries in the last 3 years. Also, penalties, he's very sound in that regard. He has only 2 penalties in the last 2 years. I think the one issue with him is he, as you see in 2023, he missed 9 games with an injury. He is a little bit older. He's a fifth-year senior, so those first 2 years came at left guard. Um, his arm length is a tiny bit of a concern. I think he measured in at like 31 and a half, or maybe it was 31 and 3/4. But his size is perfectly fine. 6'5", 315. Um, Man, you look at these metrics, you don't really find these this late in the draft. 91.6 pass block grade, also a good run defender. I think a lot of the problems I mentioned were injuries and measurables. The one issue with this game, I think, is that besides the recognizing stunts and that intuitiveness, is sometimes he doesn't sustain his blocks, which certainly can be, fixed at the next level. And for that reason, I think Bo Stevens is the pick there. Eric McAllister, an interesting prospect because he has all the production. However, he won't be the pick here. Same with Jacoby Lane. Charles Demings, what a great story, man, coming out of Stephen Austin. Not out of nowhere. He's actually been on the radar for a couple months, but he got invited to the Senior Bowl, and Yeah, man, he is now probably going to be drafted before, like, certainly drafted this year, and probably be before the seventh round, which was, originally he was a UDFA. Um, Interesting spot to draft from here because I certainly want to build up the offensive line, and someone like Trey Zune kind of um, intrigues me, but at the same time, a player that really does intrigue me is I believe it's this is how you say it is Mason Rieger. It could be Riger. This is a guy that's kind of fallen under the radar. You look at his size, and he has awesome size for an edge, man. 6'5", 248. And it's interesting because, we don't necessarily need a edge, but at the same time, I believe we do. Like we draft our Mason Thomas in the first round there. Uh, Bryce Huff retires. We have Samuel Kawanu as our edge on the other side, and I think he's fine for rotating. But I believe we just build up our defensive line here, and I think he is a high upside player this late in the draft. You do see in 2024 he was injured the whole season. He had a leg surgery that forced him to miss it. But you look at some of the metrics here, the pass rush win rate is really good. Um, and if you look at the analytics further, it actually alludes to a 23% win rate on true pass sets during the season, which is, I think it's something like top 10 in the entire draft. He's really active with his hands. He has some nice quickness. He wasn't at the Senior Bowl. He was at the Shrine Bowl, though. At least I don't recall seeing him at the Senior Bowl. He was at the Shrine Bowl and played pretty well there. If you look at his athletic score, the RAAS score, I believe, on Twitter, they also have a website. He scored like a 9.53 and had a 40-inch vertical jump. He honestly is an athlete. Like he has great hand size, great wingspan. Arm size is, it's fine. It's okay where it needs to be. The big problem with him is he is more of a pass rushing specialist. He doesn't necessarily have that huge anchor strength to set the edge consistently. And he's also an older player. I wasn't anticipating drafting all these older players. Armason Thomas is young, but Traydon Stukes was a fifth-year player, same as Bo Stevens, and same as Mason Rieger. Um, but I think at this point in the draft, we kind of go for upside. There's a couple interesting players. Like Dallin Bentley is a player that the 49ers have visited twice, so I certainly think he could be the pick here in this range with one of these three picks. I just, fall under the impression of unless we find a very exceptional run blocking tight end at this part of the draft or point in the draft, I don't necessarily think we pull the trigger just because Jake Tonjes has been serviceable and has done what he's needed to do. Anyways, though, enough riff-raff. Mason Rieger is the pick there. And we go down the board. I had a player in mind that I saw prior, and it's going to be Austin Barber. We talked about a Trent Williams retiring. Again, I really think they will sign him, the 49ers. I have to hope that they will, based on the trajectory that this offseason has gone. Um, Austin Barber, though, is just a player that I think is he does everything right. He's a solid player. You look at the run block grade, 90. Pass block grade, he's certainly a better run blocker than a pass blocker. Zone grade is good. Gap grade is good. Has only let up 3 sacks this past season. One hit. Of course, is playing the best competition in college football. Well over 2,000 snaps. He is a former basketball player in high school, so you can kind of see that athleticism translate. Similar to Max, he gets off his out of his stance really fast, has a nice quick step. I think he is an effective blocker in space, and he finishes his block. That's one thing you know. He'll like grip you really hard. He has some nice grip strength, and will, play through the whistle. The one thing you notice about on tape is that he struggles with speed rushers, better speed rushers. You notice it with Cassius Howell of Texas A&M. That's like his lowest rated game because he did kind of get wrecked in that regard, but played well against better players. Like if you look at his tape against Josephs, I think they had one rep. Joshua Josephs, he had a good rep there. Um, but all in, and one thing I forgot to mention is he has 29 career penalties, so he will definitely have to get that sorted out. Because that is, quite a lot. Again, playing against the best competition, but you cannot rely on getting bailed out like that in the league. He will get called even more if he can't fix that. And I think ultimately, like this guy could be not the immediate Trent replacement right away, but I could foresee him being a starter in the league going forward. And I like him as a player, man. He also is a good swing tackle option as well. I know we picked one of those up in Vidarian Low this year. But I really do like Austin Barber. I think he's just an above average starting tackle. He will just need to work on being able to defend speed rushers because that is one thing you really notice about in the tape, or notice in the tape. And he will be the pick there. And now we are on to our last pick. Nadami Tucker, uh, Nadami Tucker is still there. A couple interesting players. Katron Allen, kind of an interesting player. Demont Capehart, someone I considered in a couple of my other videos as defensive line depth, but because of the Osa pickup, I don't necessarily think we need to go there. Persock is an interesting corner too. He had a good combine like his teammate Takario Davis, and he's a different corner. You look at like the measurables. He is similar in size but different in physicality. I think he is. I don't know. I think he is more of a game wrecker, especially in the passing game compared to Takario. Like they're both not bad run defenders, but Takario is better in that regard. Kevin Coleman Jr. this far down the board is nice, a player that I really do like, a slot guy, a nice route runner. Caleb Elarms Orr, who I mentioned in one of my previous videos. Um, One of my first videos, actually, I was kind of mocking this guy when he was going undrafted. Michael Tafe is a very solid corner who I have a lot higher than this. He's, probably. I haven't constructed my top 100 big board yet, but he'd probably be like under 100, right around that range, 95 to 100. I think ultimately, though, we think about a position that we will also need to replace in the next few years, and a player that a lot of fans don't like. And this is kind of a safe pick here. He's a player that really was hyped up to start the whole offseason and draft process, and is not so much fallen out of favor, but is not done too much to improve his draft stock. And there's a couple guards I like here. Pat Coogan's going to be the pick. I also like Jaden Roberts, and I like Matt Golban as a center as well. But Pat Coogan is someone I haven't mocked in the last couple of videos because I there was better value at this pick. Now this 139, this kind of range is a little bit sketchy for me. There's still certainly a couple of good players like Charles Demings. I'm not a fan of Jagger Burton. I'm just going to kind of go out there and say it. The tape doesn't speak to me at all, in all honesty. Trey Zune is a player, like I mentioned, that is a player that I do like. Nadami Tucker, I just I don't know if he's worth the capital here in the fourth round. But and it's interesting. Like there's a couple players that I do really like at this pick. Of course, Pat Coogan will still be the pick, but Jeff Caldwell, very interesting. This guy ran like a four. I forget if it was a 4.31 at 6'5", 215. If we were to take a shot at wide receiver, I wouldn't hate going with a late round flyer in Jeff Caldwell. I mentioned Prisog, but Hezekiah Masses is a good option as well. A strong coverage corner who is a little bit versatile, will mostly be on the wide side, but can kind of move around and has played pretty much every snap on that Cal defense. But going to Pat Coogan, he's deep down the board and he is just a very solid player. You can, by watching his tape, you can tell he has high football IQ. I mean, this guy was the MVP of the Rose Bowl as a center, which is kind of unheard of. A solid leader, 6'5", 311. We look at the metrics. The run block grade is in the top quartile, same as the pass block, same as every single metric on the board. Of course, he was part of this Indiana team that won the chip, so he faced great competition and had some of his games against the best competition, including Miami. Um, we see a couple of good games as well, like Alabama there. Oregon, two good games against Oregon. Generally, anything above like a 60 rating is above average for a offensive lineman. So pretty much every game. Not too sure what happened with the Kennesaw State game there. That was one that I didn't watch on tape. Um, but one that I did was the final game against Miami. And what you notice about him, besides the intuitiveness, the football IQ I mentioned, and being a competitive leader, is that he has good power in his hands. He's an aggressive hand fighter and is an effective hand fighter as well. Again, 2,600 snaps played. You have that high pass block grade as well as the run block grade as well. He is going to have to work on his penalties a little bit. He had 4 in 2024, only 2 this past year, but still something that, will need to be worked on before the next level, before it gets called a lot more. You see his pad level, it kind of is a little bit inconsistent. Sometimes in all honesty, he looks like certainly a star center or offensive lineman. And then on other plays, he kind of just weirdly like dips his head and gets pushed back really easily because of that pad level. Sometimes he also has a tendency to just not really move off the snap for a little bit and relies on his good base and kind of power, which will be taken advantage of at the next level. And I think the only other weakness I can say for Coogan is that he just needs to uh, get to the second level a little bit more. He doesn't have a strong ability to redirect defensive linemen just yet. Certainly bigger defensive linemen. Um, and yeah, man, I think as a late fourth round flyer, I honestly don't hate Pat Coogan at all. Um, he is one of my favorite centers in the draft. I would probably say Jake Slaughter is one. I would probably put Connor Liu there as well. Logan Jones, and I'd put Pat Coogan above Sam Hecht. Sam doesn't necessarily fly off the board for me, but yeah, man, I think Pat Coogan is the pick there. I really do like him as a player. I don't think that PFF will like this draft at all, but we'll see. I think that we kind of address our two big positional needs in edge and safety. I think we certainly get a high upside around two-player and trade on Stukes, and we get a player that can fight for the starting job right off the bat in R. Mason Thomas in round one. And then we just kind of bulk up the offensive line. No wide receiver or running back in this draft, there's been plenty of wide receivers that I've taken in the last couple of drafts, including like Casey Concepcion, um, Zachariah Branch, Omar Cooper. I certainly wouldn't be mad at the pick. I think he will probably be a name I'll look to in one of my future drafts. But as I said, I'm trying to really change up every mock draft I do. This is my fifth one. I want to change up the first round player just to detail and give fans um, knowledge as to who these players are and who the 49ers can go with. Um, Again, just so they have a general knowledge on most all of these players in round one and round two as well. So again, just to recap, we went with R. Mason Thomas in round one, Shredown Stukes round two, and then we basically fixed up the offensive line. Bo Stevens in round four, who honestly I could think of as a player that might compete right away for the starting left guard position. I don't think that's out of the ordinary or too crazy to say. Mason Rieger as a rotational edge piece probably will have to work his way up, but as a pass rushing specialist, he is someone that I do like, especially at that range. Someone that I haven't really talked about. Austin Barber, our pick at 138, left tackle there. A very solid player who I think can come in and be depth immediately for us, and then when Trent Williams comes in, can either slot in that position and prosper, or can compete for the left tackle position there. And then we finish it off with Pat Coogan. I don't know why PFF hates him so much, but I think he is a very solid player. Again, no running back, wide receiver, or tight end. It's not a super glamorous draft. I think it's a draft that addresses the issues. I Yeah, and I do really appreciate the support on these videos. I'm gonna keep pumping them out. My next video is probably going to be, this is a 49ers channel. It always has been. All of my videos have surrounded the 49ers. I think my next video, though, is going to be a 2-round mock draft for every team. And, 52 minutes is long. That's where I'm at on this video. So certainly I'm going to try to shorten that. This 2-round mock draft that I'm going to do hopefully will be under like an hour and 10. But the reason these videos are so long is just because I want to, again, give a lot of insights into who these players are. And again, I made my website. It's rulebooksports.com, rulebooksports.com. And you can look at my top 50 big board on there. Again, as I mentioned, after I think it's Mekhi Lemon at pick 18, my pros and cons and overall scouting report gets more expansive on every single player, up to Romello Height, who is at 50. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned for more, and let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you agree, disagree, honest, constructive criticism, if you hate the picks, if you love them, if you don't like the idea of going after or going at the offensive line in the second half, and if you would prefer to go after that in the first half. And yeah, I will see you guys next time, and thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.